Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tada Bhaktaya Namo Namaha. So reading from Jaiva Dharma, Chapter 10. Nitya Dharma and History. Sri Harihar Bhattacharya was a professor residing in Agradvip. He had accepted initiation into Vaishnava Dharma and was engaged in the worship of Bhagavan Sri Krishna in his home. But a doubt arose in his mind about Vaishnavism, which he could not dispel even after speaking to many people about it. In fact, such talk only agitated his mind further. One day, Harihar went to the village of Arkatila and inquired from Sri Chaturvuj Nyayaratna, Bhattacharya Mahashaya, can you tell me how long ago Vaishnava Dharma appeared? For nearly 20 years. Anyone knows how long Vaishnava Dharma? Since when Vaishnava Dharma?
वैष्णव धर्म कितना पुराना है?
हाँ, पता नहीं.
ब्रह्मा जी
Yes.
से
How long? How old is Vaishnava Dharma? Yeah, right. Vaishnava Dharma is Nitya Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, that is ever existing. Sometimes more prominent, sometimes less. So Vaishnava Dharma is Nitya Dharma, Sanatana Dharma, Jiva Dharma. So Vaishnav means a devotee of Vishnu or Krishna. And the constitutional position of the devotees of the Lord is to serve. So since time immemorial, therefore it is known as Sanatana Dharma or Nitya Dharma, Vastav Dharma, real Dharma, Paro Dharma, superior Dharma, beyond this material world ultimately, on the transcendental plane. For nearly 20 years, Nyaya Ratna Mahashaya had laboriously studied the Nyaya Shastra. Consequently, he had become quite indifferent to religion and did not like to be bothered with the religious discussions. He only displayed any devotional tendency when he was performing Shakti Puja, worshipping Goddess Durga. When Nyayaratna heard this question, he thought that Harihar, being partial to the Vaishnava religion, intended to embroil him into a dispute, and that it would be best to avoid such a conflict. Thinking like this, Nyayaratna Mahashaya said, Harihar, what kind of question are you asking me today? You have studied the Nyaya Shastra all the way up to the Muktipat section. Look, you know that there is no mention of Vaishnava Dharma anywhere in the Nyaya Shastra. So why are you burdening me with such a strange question? Harihar, now slightly aggravated, replied, Bhattacharya Mahashaya, my forefathers have been Vaishnavas for many generations. I am also initiated with the Vaishnava mantra and have never had any doubt about Vaishnava Dharma. However, you may have heard that Tarka Churamani of Vikrampur intends to uproot the Vaishnava religion and as a result is preaching against it at the moment, both locally and abroad, and earning a good deal of wealth by so doing. In a meeting that was attended mostly by worshippers of Durga, He proclaimed that the Vaishnava religion is very recent and has no philosophical substance. He said that only low-class people become Vaishnavas. High-class people do not respect Vaishnava Dharma. So, huh?
Is there his explanation, or is he do not respect?
Well, not right here, but actually we can see that in this material world, and especially of course here we see in the age of Kali, different persons are there worshipping either Krishna or Vishnu, or then they worship the demigods, Lord Shiva specifically, or Durga Devi. So they are known as Shaktas, worshipping the Shakti, the energy of the Lord. And so sometimes they become more prominent than the Vaishnavas. And so of course basically they have a misunderstanding of the absolute truth. And therefore they deride the Vaishnavas. Also, one reason is that many times there's a deviation there also amongst different worshippers, like even the Vaishnavas. As in Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he mentioned there are 13 upper sampradayas amongst the Vaishnavas. Those who claim to worship Krishna or Vishnu, but they do not so in a proper way. They may be sentimental, or they may be engaged in materialistic activities. So because of that, the Nadas, they are deriding them and saying these are strange fellows, so they are low-class people. Because some of these Vaishnavas, so-called Vaishnavas, they engage in illicit activities, in improper activities. Therefore they are not respected. And so that is especially the case in the last few hundred years. But even before, so there's, that has been seen in the scriptures, in history, that so the worshippers of Krishna or Vishnu are there, and then the Mayavadis are there also. And then of course those who worship the demigods and those who are performing Hatha Yoga in order to advance in spiritual life. And so amongst all of these different groups, some are more serious than others. So there may be Vaishnavas, some are serious, some are less serious. And similarly those who worship Durga Devi or Shiva, some may be to some extent sincere, following principles, religious principles, whereas others may not be so. Yogis, usually, mostly the yogis, they may be sincere, performing tapasya, mostly in a secluded place, but still they may have some misconceptions also, and Mayavadis also. Different Mayavadis with different understandings, those following Shankaracharya, those following Buddha. And even amongst them, different groups are there, and different understandings are there. That is seen even nowadays. So similarly amongst the Vaishnavas also, different groups are there. Of course we know 4 Vaishnava Sampradayas are there, Brahma Mada Vaishnav Sampradaya, Brahma Mada Gaudiya Vaishnav Sampradaya, or then Ramanuja Sampradaya, Nimbarka Sampradaya, Vishnu Swami Sampradaya. These are bona fide Sampradayas. So at the same time, amongst these four Vaishnava Sampradayas, different groups are there, different Vaishnavas are there amongst them also, with different understandings. In our Sampradaya, Madhvacharyas followers are there, and then the followers of Mahaprabhu, there's a slight difference there in their understanding. And amongst the Gaudiya Vaishnavas, those following Mahaprabhu, there are so different groups which are there. Some are bona fide and some are seen as Aprasampradaya, not actually properly following the teachings of Mahaprabhu. And therefore, different orders, like here in this example, those worshipping Durga Devi, they didn't have a very good view or understanding or respect towards the Vaishnavas. Most probably because those Vaishnavas are not pure Vaishnavas. So those are purely following the acharyas, the bona fide acharyas, with a proper understanding and proper conduct, they are rare. And we can see even, for example, practically speaking, in our society or other societies, so different opinions are there about, for example, in our society of what Prabhupada wanted his disciples to do. What is most important? And then, so even amongst the devotees in ISKCON, different opinions are there, and some don't like others, and vice versa. And even amongst the Gaudiya Math, different Gaudiya Maths are there, and even within the different Gaudiya Maths, different understandings may be there. So Sadhguru is rare, the pure devotee who is a pure representative of the parampara of the Supreme Lord, they are rare. And similarly, Sad Shishya, the pure devotee, disciple who is able to understand the mood of the spiritual master, who is able to properly follow, and who is then respectful towards all, they are rare. So, and similarly in all the different groups, so those who are properly situated, they are in minority and others are in majority. Even you may see other religion, the Christian religion, the Muslims, so some of them, they're able to understand the teachings of Jesus Christ, the Bible, or some are able to understand the Quran properly and were properly following. So these are the minority, actually, that we can see. So here one person was saying that the Vaishnava religion is recent and has no philosophical substance. But Vaishnava religion is eternal and the philosophy is there. The perfect philosophy is there amongst the Vaishnavas, the pure Vaishnavas. Yes.
But what was before Mahaprabhu?
What was before Mahaprabhu? Yes. Before Mahaprabhu, so Ishwara Puri was there. Of course, his spiritual master, Madhavendra Puri, and now Ishwara Puri, and then so his spiritual master Mahaprabhu's, and then Madhavendra Puri. They were worshipping Krishna also. And, huh? Well, Madhavendra Puri, he was worshipping Krishna. And yes, it is not known if he was worshipping Srimati Radharani. At least I don't remember hearing in this regard. But just like, for example, Madhavendra Puri, he was in Rimuna, and then he was seeing the temple of Chir Chor Gopinath. So there you can see, right? You have been?
Yes, now I understand why we went there.
Yeah. And so there you can see Gopinath, a very beautiful deity carved by Ramchandra Bhagwan himself. So Gopinath is beautiful, and then so carved from a big stone, black granite, and you can see there a tree. You can see the Omkar, Om is there around Gopinath, and you can see the cows and the calves. Then I asked the Pujari, where is Srimati Radharani? And he said, well, Radharani is together with Krishna. So in this way, we may see that before Mahaprabhu, the understanding may be there that Radharani is there, but then the deity may not be there. Just like Govinda Dev, Gopinath, Madan Mohan. So originally there was no deity of Radharani there, because of course the great-grandson Brajanab, great-grandson of Krishna Brajanab, who installed them, and so he was just, he just had the deities carved of Krishna. And certainly he had heard about Radharani also, but because Brajanab, he was staying in Dwarka, and in Dwarka only the queens were there. But everyone had heard about Radharani also. But they could not really understand fully the pastimes of Krishna and Braj. So therefore they did not install, because Krishna was not married to Radharani. So, but he was married to the queens. So, and even so, and the mother of Parikshit was there, Uttara, and she had seen Krishna, because Brajanath, he had not seen Krishna, the great-grandson. Or maybe he was very, very small. But Uttara saw, she had seen Krishna, talked with Krishna. So therefore she was asked also to help the persons who were making deity. So describing somehow also to some extent Krishna's form, his beauty. So before Mahaprabhu, so Radharani was not really worshipped. Even, for example, Udupi Krishna is there. So that is Krishna. So also, of course, with the understanding that he's there in Braj, and he has a laddu also in his hand. So that is more as Bal Gopal. So he may be, of course, worshipped with some more reverence amongst the Madhvacharya followers. So Radharani is well known, of course, and even in the Puranas, Radharani is mentioned, Padma Purana, Adi Purana, and so on. Many verses are there in glorification of Srimati Radharani. glorification of Radha Krishna there. But only after Mahaprabhu, then the glories of Srimati Radharani have been recited. Especially by the six Goswamis then. Under the glories of Radharani. So they have spread. But just like Krishna's glories are eternal, Srimati Radharani's glory is also eternal. But before Mahaprabhu saw, Krishna was worshipped mostly alone. Only after Mahaprabhu then appeared, then the acharyas, so they were also worshipping Radharani. They were putting the deities of Radharani together with Krishna, with Govindadev, Gopinath, Madan Mohan, and all the other deities. Other question? Hare Krishna. After many days, seeing you in the evening.
I just felt that I'm missing you a lot.
Okay.
And the morning also I can't come now.
Yeah.
There is no seva in the morning also.
Yeah. Fine. Yeah. So we'll talk after for the Griha Pravesh. So when I first heard such conclusions from a scholar of his stature, it somehow what pained my heart, but when I thought it over, it occurred to me that no Vaishnava Dharma existed anywhere in Bengal prior to the appearance of Sri Chaitanya Dev. Before that, everyone worshipped Goddess Durga and recited the Shakti mantras. Granted, there were a few Vaishnavas like ourselves who worshipped by reciting Vaishnava mantras, but everyone's goal was ultimately to attain Brahma and Mukti. And to this end, they diligently applied themselves. So that, of course, there is one view here which is presented, but and maybe specifically in Bengal, not so many Vaishnavas were there. But if you see in South India, so the tradition is very much there. The Vaishnava Dharma is there. Like in Sri Rangam, in Tirupati. So these are all Vaishnavas. And the tradition is much older. So they are in South India than, so to say, in Bengal before Mahaprabhu. So there were less Vaishnavas there, more worshippers of Durga Devi. So, especially in Bengal, there are so many devotees of Durga Devi. Before Mahaprabhu's appearance, even after the appearance of Mahaprabhu, even now there are so many devotees of Durga Devi. So practically more than the Vaishnavas, the worshippers of Durga Devi, even now. One time there was a Bengali devotee, so initiated by Prabhupada, and so staying in Vrindavan, and then he came to Prabhupada. So that was just before Kartik, Durgashtami is there. He said, Prabhupada, I want to go to my house. He said, why? Prabhupada asked, why? Because we are worshipping Durga Devi. And Prabhupada said, now you don't have to go to worship Durga Devi. You stay here and you worship Radheshyam. Srimati Radharani is the original Shakti. So you can worship Radharani and then you don't have to separately worship Durga Devi. In the type of Vaishnava Dharma into which we were initiated, everyone approved of the Panchopasana system. Panchopasana. So, But after Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's time, Vaishnava Dharma assumed a new outlook. And now Vaishnavas cannot even bear to hear the words Mukti and Brahma. So Panchopasana. Upasana means worship, Panch means 5. So, even sometimes the Mayavadis, they do Panchopasana. So worshipping Vishnu, and then they will worship also, of course, also Shiva, Durga, and then Suryadev also. And I believe Ganesh also was there. So different times, different conceptions were there, understandings were there. But a true Vaishnava will only worship his Ishtadev. So it may be Krishna or Vishnu or Sri Ram, Narayan. But they will respect the others also. So I couldn't even say what they think bhakti is. Well, as they say, a one-eyed cow. A one-eyed cow often strays from the herd. That applies perfectly to modern Vaishnavas. So my question is, did this type of Vaishnava Dharma exist previously, or has it only appeared since the time of Chaitanya Dev? Seeing that Harihar was not as orthodox a Vaishnava as he had feared, Nyaya Ratna Mahashai's face blossomed with happiness. Harihar, he said, you are a true scholar of the Nyaya Shastra. You have just expressed exactly what I believe. These days there is a new upsurge of Vaishnava Dharma, and I am afraid to say anything against it. We must be a little cautious because it is the age of Kali. Many wealthy and respectable gentlemen have now accepted Chaitanya's doctrine. They completely disregard us and even think that we are their enemies. I'm afraid that our profession will become obsolete within a short time. Why? Even the inferior castes of oil sellers, betel leaf vendors, and gold traders have taken to studying the Shastra, and that pains us. So previously only the Brahmanas, they were studying the Shastras, the Vedic literatures. But then, of course, Puranas there, or Upapuranas are there, which may also be studied by others also, who may not be Brahmanas. And especially also after Mahaprabhu's appearance. And the literatures of the Vaishnavas, that is for everyone. And there's no distinction that only Brahmanas should read, or others may not read. So, and especially also previously, so the Brahmanas were studying the scriptures, only the Brahmanas, but even the women, they were not studying the Vedas. But then, so, then the other Puranas, Upapuranas are there, and then that may be open to everyone, and especially Mahaprabhu also. So he empowered his devotees, instructed his devotees to write transcendental literatures for all. But then even we have, for example, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, the Bhagavad Gita, that is for everyone. And Krishna is also explaining it in that chapter. So that not only Brahmanas, they may know me, But even those who are not Brahmanas, even those who are considered inferior, Vaishya, Shudra, or the women, they may also study the Bhagavad Gita. They may also worship Krishna, and then they may attain perfection. Because ultimately everyone is an eternal servant of Krishna. So it is everyone's right to worship Krishna. So because ultimately we are all Jiva Tattva. So Tatastha Shakti. So energy means female. Subordinated to the Lord. And meant to serve the Lord. So, but then in the transcendental realm, so female and male forms are there. In the transcendental living service of the Lord. And in the material world, although men and women are there, but anyone who is trying to enjoy, so it means yes, Purusha Bhav, if you try to enjoy. Even one may be a woman, in the body of a woman, but if a woman wants to enjoy, that means Purusha Bhav is there, enjoying material world, enjoying material nature. So that is also mentioned in the scriptures. So, but we should give up this Purusha Bhav and understand we are the eternal servants of Krishna, meant to serve Param Purush, Krishna, the only hero, Krishna, and everyone else is subservient. Everyone is meant to serve Krishna with love. But then, of course, different relationships may be there, as in Braj. So servitorship, friendship, and then parental affection, and then conjugal relationship. But everyone is doing for the pleasure of Krishna. And then when Krishna is satisfied, then automatically we are satisfied. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he was most merciful. And he was giving the holy names, he was giving knowledge, he was giving his mercy to everyone. And he wanted his followers also to give the holy names to everyone. Not make any distinction between man and woman, Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and so on. Even Antyaja, even those who are not born in the Vana ashram system, so considered low class, but if they take up the chanting of the holy names, then they become purified, and they may become Vaishnavas, and then they are as good as Brahmanas. Look, for a long time the Brahmanas had arranged things so that no other caste could study the Shastra. Even the Kayastas, who are just below the Brahmana caste, everyone is obliged to honor our words. Now people of all castes have become Vaishnavas and deliberate on philosophical truth. And this has greatly damaged the reputation of the Brahmana caste. Nimai Pandit is responsible for the destruction of Brahmana Dharma. So they were criticizing Nimai, the Supreme Lord. So therefore Mahaprabhu also decided to take sannyas, because as a sannyasi one is more respected. And so that is then a kind of facility, because then one is not involved in the social life. A sannyasi is fully dependent on Krishna, and he travels from one place to another place, distributing the holy names, giving transcendental knowledge. Harihar Tarka Churamani has spoken correctly. Whether he has done so out of greed for wealth or after careful analysis of the situation. When I heard the words of the Vaishnavas, my body burns. When I hear the words of the Vaishnavas, my body burns with anger. And they go as far as to say that Shankaracharya established Mayavad Shastra on the order of Bhagavan himself, and that the Vaishnava religion is eternal. So, that is actually explained by Bhagavan himself, by Krishna himself. The religion that sprung up not even 100 years ago has now become beginningless. How amazing! It is said a benefit which is meant for a man is enjoyed by another. So, different persons, they have different understandings of course, different sayings are there. Usually what we deserve, that we will get, more so than what we desire. So according to previous activities, we will get a certain result in the future, or that is enjoyed now, that we have now. So, but this law of karma is very complex. And so for us, ourselves, so there's no need to try to find out too much about why what things are happening in life, but they're happening, of course, because of different reasons. It may be due to previous, depending on what it is, due to previous, of course, activities which then result in, if one is engaged in positive activities, punya karma, then the result is good. But if one is performing activities against the scriptures, so then the result will be not desired. So, also in this life, so we have the choice also. In this life we have the choice to be in a mode of goodness or in a mode of passion. Of course, to some extent one is bound also and influenced by the modes of material nature. But some independence is there to improve our situation and then to surrender to Krishna. And so we can choose to be in the mode of goodness rather than passion and ignorance. But in conditioned state still, sometimes one may try to choose, but one may not be able to achieve. So one may try to want to control the senses, but it is not easy. Whatever glory Navadvip attained formerly has now been laid to waste. So Navadvip was known as a place of learning. There were so many saintly persons there, studying the scriptures. But in Mahaprabhu's time, so Mahaprabhu introduced the Yuga Dharma, the chanting of the holy names, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. And of course, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ultimately, so he came to give Braj Bhakti. And so Mahaprabhu's time, so still there were many scholars there. And Mahaprabhu himself, Vishwambar, Nimai Pandit, he was showing great learning. He is the Supreme Lord, he is most learned. But in the past time also, so he was known as a Pandit, a learned scholar, right from you may say even boyhood. And then the position of, the position of the Smarta was diminished, of the Smarta Brahmanas. And one time one great scholar came. So he challenged the Dhamvasis in Navadvip for a big debate. But they were all afraid, because he was a great scholar. And he was well known. Then he thought, anyhow, Nimai Pandit is here and he's quite knowledgeable also. So we tell this case of Kashmiri to first go to Nimai Pandit and discuss with him. And they were thinking, so that he may be defeated and then we are saved. But if he conquers, so Nimai Pandit, then also no harm. He may then not even want to come here to Navadvip and also have a debate with us. So they thought that is the best solution. But then Nimai Pandit, so he defeated that Keshav Kashmiri. And so Nimai Pandit was well known in Navadvip as a great scholar. And then automatically, then the Smarta Brahmanas' influence was diminished. But then the Vaishnavas, they can recognize the Vaishnavas, they can recognize the Supreme Lord. So in Mahaprabhu's time, the Vaishnavas were there in Navadvip, and they accepted Mahaprabhu as the Supreme Lord. They realized that he was actually the Supreme Lord. Not right in the beginning, but later on. In particular, there are some Vaishnavas who now live at Gadigacha in Navadvip, who look upon the world as a shallow earthen plate. A few good scholars among them have stirred up such a great commotion that it has ruined the entire country. Now the occupational duties, the four castes, and the eternal truth of the doctrine of Mayavad and the worship of the Devatas and Devis are all fading into oblivion. So, people seldom perform the Shraddha ceremony for the benefit of their deceased relatives anymore. How are we teachers to survive? So the Smarta Brahmanas are very much explaining or stressing the importance of Varna Ashram, the four Varnas and the four Ashrams, that this has to be followed And most of the Smata Brahmanas, they're Mayavadis also. So therefore here it is mentioned. So the doctrine of Mayavad. So, and even nowadays you can see, mostly many times the Smata Brahmanas are Mayavadis. But, of course, they study the scriptures in personal way, with any personal understanding. And so that was there at Mahaprabhu's time in Navadip also. And sometimes they were worshipping the Devas or the Devis also, just as a kind of stepping stone. Or even as the Panchopasana, sometimes the Mayavadis are also worshipping Vishnu and Shiva, Durga, Surya, Ganesh. And just to be focused on something, because to be focused on nothing is not so easy, not to think of anything. Yeah, yes.
About Mayavadi, but they do acknowledge the God himself. Therefore, they're meditating on him in order to emerge into him. But so it's not like impersonalism.
Well, no, still it is impersonalism, because so they that is the ultimate understanding they have. That the absolute truth is impersonal, Brahma Satya, Param Brahma, Param Satya, that is the Brahma Jyoti, so, which is without form, and we will merge in that. So
the immersion is exactly like in God. I finally met them in the train, we had conversation.
No, yeah, but they're different Mayavadis. Some they just want to merge in the Brahma Jyoti, the light.
But that's the sense they're becoming like also God in the end.
Yeah. Yeah, different Mayavadis also. But some of the Mayavadis, they see the form of the Lord in the beginning, but then they will merge in that. They want to merge in that. And that is even many of the yogis. They meditate on Paramatma, the super soul, but then they want to merge in Paramatma. So that is like the Mayavadi. But then some they may be elevated of the yogis, and then they understand that the absolute truth is there. So different Mayavadis are there, with different understandings. But mostly they are philosophically inclined, they study the Vedas, of course, and they follow Varna ashram, and they are strict usually. They're strictly following Varna ashram. And then people seldom perform the Shraddha ceremony, for the benefit of forefathers. So the Vaishnavas, they worship the Supreme Lord, and they know when we worship the Supreme Lord, then the forefathers are benefited. So therefore, not all the Vaishnavas are performing Shraddha ceremony for the benefit of the forefathers. But even as Vaishnavas, it may be done, we may do that also, and then the benefit will be there. If we do a Vaishnav way, benefit will be there for the forefathers. At the same time, if you don't do the Shraddha ceremony, still, if you engage in devotional service, then the forefathers are also benefited. So you may do the Shraddha ceremony or you may not do. but it should be done if it is done in a Vaishnava way. And still you can see that in this world, of course different times may be there. Just like Mahaprabhu's time, then many of the devotees, they were not performing Shraddha ceremony. But nowadays, so therefore, sometimes Vaishnava Dharma is prominent, sometimes the worship of Durga Devi is prominent, sometimes the Mayavadis are very much prominent. So different times are there. And sometimes, so people are very much inclined towards the different ceremonies which may be there, so including the Shraddha ceremony. Some other times they are less inclined to do that. So these two persons were discussing, who were not really understanding the Vaishnava Dharma, the proper understanding of the Vaishnava literatures. So they also later on, so that we will read next time, they came to Gudrun Rip and they met with Advaita Das and to Paramahamsa Babaji. And so that is actually important that we have to go for guidance to the representative of the Lord, who is knowledgeable in the scriptures, who is pure in conduct. So one should be under good guidance. A devotee who is knowledgeable, who is realized, who is fully engaged in devotional service. So one should be under their guidance. Then one may be able to have the proper understanding. Otherwise some deviation may be there. So these Harihara Nyaya Ratnas, so they were not blessed with good association, and they were not blessed with the proper understanding. But they were Brahmanas, and so they then met later Advaita Das and Paramahamsa Babaji, and then they were more fortunate. They became fortunate at this time. Any more questions? Question was there? Question? Okay, we'll stop here. I can stop it. So you wanted to, you're done? stopped? You sharing? I can do it. Oops. I should share. Let me see. It's done? No, it's still live.
No, I'm
I'm sure you want to stop streaming.
streaming live.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine, now it's done.
Okay, so we need to put here.